Today I'm going to make a simple note-taking app where you can write your note and then you can add a note, and it's going to look something like this. So I'm going to go here and first add my container. So I'll do a div, give it a class container. Oops. And then inside my container, I'm going to have my notes. So it's going to be an input this time, and it's going to have an attribute called placeholder that's going to say write note here, or maybe enter your thought here, and then close that in, and I'll be able to see my little placeholder. Now I can go into CSS and target those placeholders. I could give it an ID of, or I'll give it a class because there's going to be multiple notes. So a class of note, and then I can do dot note to target the class. And I can first of all give it a width. So let's say I want a width of 200 pixels, a height of 200 pixels, but I want it to be a circle. So I'll say a border radius 50%, right? And then to have it, the placeholder at the center, either I could do text align center. There we go. And if you click on it, I'm able to write here, right? So that's kind of what it is. And let me actually select the container, give it a border just so I could see what's going on. 5 pixels in thickness, solid line, black line. All right, so this is a container. I need it to be, let's say 100 VH. And then I need it to have a margin of 50 pixels. So it's kind of centered. And then after that, I would need it to have a padding of 50 pixels. So that's the space inside. Margin is the space outside. So padding is going to put 50 pixels top and bottom, left and right inside the container, inside the black box. And that's pretty much it for that. Then what I would do is add a button. So just kind of how I had it before, I had a button here. When I click on it, there's new notes. So what I'll do is I'll go into the container. It doesn't really matter exactly where I put it because it's going to have the same position no matter where I put it. I'm going to give it an ID of button, and it's just going to be a plus sign. And now in CSS, I can target it using a hashtag because it's an ID. So hashtag button. So classes dots hashtags with IDs. Okay, and then I'll give it, well, where is it? It's actually here at the bottom left corner. So first of all, I'll give it a font size of 30 pixels so it's more apparent. A font weight of bold. I'll give it, let's see, a background. Let me see what color I want. So maybe this color over here, the background of hot pink. And so you'll notice that it's a box. I would want to give it a width of, let's say, 50 pixels and a height of 50 pixels, but I want it to be round, so I'll give it a border radius, whoops, of 50%. And then I want the plus sign to be in the middle, so I'll just do display flex. And then I can do justify content center, which moves it to the center horizontally, so it's going to move to the right. And then align items does it vertically, so it's going to move downwards. So eventually it ends up at the center, and we can only do that if we set this button to have a display of flex. All right, and then I obviously want it to be positioned fixed. So from the bottom, like 16 pixels, and from the right, 16 pixels. Right, beautiful. So now it's fixed no matter where I go. If I did position absolute, it would actually be kind of relative to, where is it? I think to the container. So that's why we want fixed, because we want it fixed to a certain position. All right, so then I'll probably go give the background, which is the body, background of like a light blue. See how that looks like? And then I guess I could do the container a yellow, maybe, or maybe white. Depends. So I could do background, hashtag, paste that hex code in there. And then let's get rid of the border. Maybe give it a border radius of, let's say, like 16 pixels or 15. So it's round. Let me open it up in debug mode and see what it looks like. I think if I change this to maybe white, which is F 3 times, I think that would look more coherent. So that's kind of what it looks like. It definitely needs to be bigger though, because I think here I'm zoomed in. That's why it looks like that. Let's see. So for the, where is it, the note, we could do 400 and 400. Save that, reload, see what it looks like here. Maybe that's too big. 300. I think that's fine. All right, so that's good. And then that's honestly it for the design. Let's move on to the functionality. Just one more thing though. When I hover over the button, so when the button is in a state of hover, I want the background color to change to a darker shade. So I'm just going to copy this one, kind of paste it over here in the code that I didn't use a shader, get like a few shades darker, copy that, paste that in there. So now when I hover over it, it should become darker. Okay, now onto JavaScript. So JavaScript. What I want to do here is when I click on the button, another one of these little circle notes pops up. So first of all, I need to target the button. I need to target the container because I want to put the new note inside the button, and I need to target the note class or just the note because I want that to appear. So first of all, let me target the button. So I'll do variable button, I'll create a variable button in JavaScript, and then I'll have to set it equal to the button from HTML. And the way I do this is by accessing the document, which is basically the document object model, the DOM, and it is a copy that your browser makes of your HTML page. Now, the reason that the browser makes a copy of your HTML page is because JavaScript is an object-oriented programming language. What does that mean? JavaScript only works with objects, and HTML elements are not objects. And so your browser takes your HTML page, it takes all of the elements and converts them into objects, technically nodes, but objects just for the case, just for this example, and puts them in a document called the DOM, the document object model. And so that is what we access in JavaScript when we want to access those elements, right? So document, and then we access them by using functions like get element by ID. And then in quotations, we put the ID of the element that we want. So for me, I put an ID of button, so I'm just going to copy that and paste that in here, right? So now I targeted my button. Next thing I want to target is the container itself. So I'll do variable container in JavaScript and I'll set it equal to the container from HTML by accessing the DOM. And I'll do get element by ID, although I don't have an ID there. I could just say ID container and then put that in here. All right. I could also, actually, I think that's all I need. Yeah. So now here's the thing. I don't want to target the input because what I want to do is I want to create a new element when a certain action happens. So I'll have to create a function. So a variable, and I'm going to call it on button click is my function. So function, and I'll put in here between these curly brackets what I want to happen. So what I want to happen when the button is clicked is that I want to access the document and create a new element input, right? I'm going to set that equal to a variable called new note, all right? So then I need to actually add the element to my HTML page because right now all I did was create it. So it's kind of just existing, but it's not actually in the HTML page embedded in it. I haven't told it where to go. So I wanted to go inside the container because again, the container is like the white box. All of my notes are in there, right? They're going to go in there. So what I'll do is I'll set the container and I'll say append child. So I'm adding because append means add. So add a child So in HTML, you know, it's kind of like everything is a tree. So it's like the container is the parent, and then you have children in there. So that would be your notes, right? So I'm adding the new note. Oh, and I forgot the quotations here. All right. So now keep in mind that I'm creating a new input. So basically what I'm doing is if I were in HTML and I would just be doing input, right? And that's it. That's literally all I did with this line of code over here. So because of that, it doesn't have the same styling, and it also doesn't have a placeholder. It has nothing. So I actually have to add that placeholder in JavaScript. So I'll have to do new note, and then I'll have to add in a placeholder because it's an attribute, and set it equal to whatever I have over here, which is enter your thought here. All right, so that's one thing. And then the next thing would be to actually add the class of note so that it has the class of note. So that it has, you know, the styles that the notes are going to have. So width of 300 pixels and a height of 300 pixels and so on. So I'll just do new note dot class, oops, camel case. So lowercase and then capital, and then plus equal, and set it equal to note, right? So now what I did right now is just created a function. I didn't tell, I never called the function. I never told the button that I want anything to do with the function. I just called it on button click, but it really had something to do with the button until I actually access the button and I add an event listener. So what this means is that the button is going to listen for a certain event to happen, and that event is the first parameter, and it's going to be click. So button, when the actual button is actually going to listen to when it's clicked, and when it is clicked on, it's going to pass, or it's actually going to call this function on button click. Now, if I save that and I click on the button, I have my little bubble here. So let me actually open that up over here. So if I click on the button, I have it. You'll notice that they're very close together. So to fix that, I'll actually go to the container, give it a display of grid, and then I'll tell it how many columns I want. So grid template columns, say I want only, I don't know how many fit, maybe 4 of them. So I'll do repeat 4 times 1FR. So that's basically saying separate this container into 4 equally spaced columns, right? So there should be, did I spell that wrong? Grid, template, columns, repeat 4 times 1FR. Oh, it's because I didn't add. Okay, there we go. There we go. So then now there's also space, but I want to make sure that there's space. So I'll do a grid gap, say 1EM. All right. But now here's the problem. If I continue to do more, they actually go outside of the container. So what I want to do is set the container to have a minimum height of 100 VH, but the actual height, I want it to be the minimum content. So let me save that and reload. So now if I add it, right, it'll actually increase the size of the container because it needs to be the height of minimum content. But if I reload, it's still going to be, the minimum height is going to be 100 VH because that's how I set it to be. So right now, VH, by the way, means vertical height of the screen. So it's 100 vertical height of the screen because it's the minimum that I want it to be. So if the actual minimum content height, which is kind of just like about under the little note here, circle, is less than 100, then the container will stay at 100 VH, right? But again, if I increase this, and now, right now, if I click on one more, it becomes more than 100 VH, then that's fine. It could reach the minimum content. That's kind of what it is. So now that's fine. I also want to make sure that they don't overflow here this way as well, because you can clearly see that happening. So to fix that, I'll actually do the same thing. I'll just add a minimum width of 100 WH, right? The width height of the screen, if that makes sense. And then the actual width is the minimum content. So the width is the minimum content. So whatever, you know, minimum, the height in which the minimum content reaches is the width, but If that is not the case, then the minimum width it could be is 100 WH, which is, what do you call it? Let's see. Oh, that's 100 WH. So that's definitely way too small. So I think what I could do, let's see, maybe I could do something like 80%. And then I'll just take the body, give that a display of flex so that I can actually put the container in the center. So justify content center, align items center. Let's see what that looks like. There we go. Beautiful. So now, when I go and click on the plus, well, that's still a problem, isn't it? The minimum width. Let's see how we could fix this. So width is the minimum content. The minimum width is 80%. All right, so I changed the minimum width to be 150 VH, and that seems to work. So if I just click on plus 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 and I do this, it won't overflow. The only thing is I want it to be responsive, of course, and so I don't actually want it to look like this when I shrink it. What I do want is for them, so as I shrink them, or as I shrink the screen, I want the columns to get less and less, right? Because I need there to be like 2 columns at this point, right? So I can only see 2 of the little notes here. So what I'll do is I'll go to the bottom and I'll add a media query. So at media, and I'll say when the maximum width is 800 pixels, I want the container's columns, so grid template columns, to become, let's say, 1FR, 1FR, which is basically just saying I want you to separate into 2 equally spaced columns. So that's kind of what it's going to look like here. So if I click on plus plus plus, and then I move this to be kind of 800 pixels, it should be only what do you call it, 200, not 200, 2 columns. And there is a problem though because of the width. Well, that's great. Maybe that's what the problem is, the minimum content. I don't really want it to be, what if I delete this? But then it's gonna overflow, is it not? And it's still the same width. So what about just have the width be a certain height, not a height. Do percentage. Well, that's not good. If I do 80%, just playing around with the values until it looks right. But then it's gonna overflow though. Now it's good, but it's gonna overflow if I add something. So that's like bad. So then the solution would be to add, can't do width. How about the minimum width that it could be? Would that make sense if I do min content? Let me reload and see. So save up here, then reload here. So if I go and add, there we go, it works. Now it's not overflowing, but at the same time, I still don't see them. If I scroll down, I'll be able to see 2 columns, but I still kind of don't see that. It needs to be more responsive. Well, it kind of is being responsive right now, but still, I can clearly see them stacking up. But still, let me go and add one more media query. So let's say, let me just copy this one and I'll add one for when it's like 600 pixels. And I'll leave this 800 pixels and I'll just leave this one to be 1 column and see what that looks like. So now if I shrink this to be 600, there we go, that's what I wanted. So now it's 600 pixels and it's responsive. And you can enter your thought here and the container, which is a white box, reaches towards all the way to the end. No matter how many I add, it reaches towards the end. All right, we got it. Finally. And then yeah, that's kind of it. So I can enter my thought. If I want to increase the size of the actual text, I can go here to the note and just say font size, I don't know, 25 pixels. Oops. Save that, reload. Oh, never mind. That's way too much. How about we do... Actually, I could do 25 pixels and then have the placeholder, which I haven't even targeted, I think. So I could do dot note placeholder to target the attribute and give it a font size of, I don't know what it was, 12 pixels. There we go. So now if I write though, that's too small. How about I do 16? So then this is what it looks like. Okay, so this is my thought. And I can add however many I want. Another note. I love dogs. AI rocks. I also like rocks. And I can't spell, like ever. All right. So yeah, that's kind of it for today. Yeah, so that's it. And it's responsive. It's really pretty. All right, that's it. Bye.